that are on right now. Deanne Brink, she's our computer specialist. Tom O'Brien speaking right now. I'm the media guy. Jeff Witcher is with our slipped my mind, Jeff, right now, but lobbying, there we go. Patty is involved with everything, it seems like. And Charmaine is on our grassroots, and then Ryan Cotton, we could all wave when we get introduced there. Ryan Cotton is going to speak tonight, but he's also our grass tops guy. And so we're all here together, and we haven't had a real good meeting since, before the pandemic. We had one Zoom meeting early, but we didn't get a lot of participation, and then we thought we'd give it a try again, seeing everybody's a little more familiar with the process now, and can get on easier, and we can get the word out to everybody. So a little bit about the Citizens Climate Lobby Group as a whole. Patty did a good job speaking there a minute ago about it, but we're the Grand Haven chapter. There's chapters all around the state, all around the country, and in fact, all around the world. And as the name states, Citizens Climate Lobby, we're the citizens lobbying to get the climate in better condition. Okay, that's what it really comes down to. And one of our main efforts right there across the nation right now that all our groups are involved with is the House Bill 763. And 763 is the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And, it's a bipartisan climate change solution that we're hoping to get our congressmen and our senators on board to get something passed. We've obviously got a new administration in the White House now, and we're moving forward. So hopefully you've all heard about Citizens Climate Lobby Group, and if you haven't, please join. It's really simple. Just type in Citizens Climate Lobby. Many things will pop up. Once you get to the home page, right in the upper left corner is a Join CCL button. It doesn't take more than 3 minutes at best to join the Citizens Climate Lobby Group. And then it's going to put it's going to ask you for your name and your address and your zip code eventually there. Maybe not even your address, just your zip code and your email. And then you can get registered under that zip code, and you actually become a member of the Grand Haven chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby Group. I think I might have saw 600 and something recently in our group. When I logged in, I don't know where I go all the time when I'm in the website, but it seemed like it popped up with that many. But that was a large increase since the last time I got an update.
It also includes the whole area, so Muskegon and Whitehall and
right. Yeah, it's a Grand Haven Lakeshore chapter. So it isn't just focused on Grand Haven. Jeff's from Muskegon, and we've got people from all around the really bigger than the Tri-Cities area, but because it goes up to Whitehall and Muskegon and such. Now, we're going to have everybody muted here, except for the people that are going to be speaking. They're going to share their screen. If you'd like to ask questions after the presentation or during the presentation, go ahead and go down to that chat tab at the bottom, move your cursor around or your mouse down at the bottom. You can click on the chat, and then you can go ahead and chat to the whole group at once. And if you want to chat just to a person, you can click on their picture, and there's a little box in the upper right corner that allows you to just chat with them, I'm pretty sure. Chat right there in that little box there that you could chat with an individual person. So feel free to ask questions. That's what we're here for. And at this time, I'm going to look to my chapter group and see if they want to add any additional information before we introduce our speakers for the night.
Nope.
Good? Okay. All right. One thing I did miss as I look at my notes here. Also, when you do log in and you join to be a CCL member, there's just look around a little bit in there. I can't tell exactly, but you can join to get a monthly call into your local representative. You get a quick text message reminding you. You just click on the number, it dials it automatically. It gives you a little menu of what you can say to help our congressman, in this case, Bill Heisengut, to get him on board to help sign and get this bill 763 passed. So having said that, as we get into the meeting here, we do have our guest speakers tonight, and we have Ryan Cotton, who's been city manager at several locations across West Michigan here, and along with Peter Boogart, and they'll be speaking tonight on some of the Holland related issues that have gone down with their facility in the past little while. And Peter Boogart, by the way, is a member of the Holland chapter of our group, and he's guest speaking for us tonight on the presentation. So there's a two-part presentation tonight. Part one being the community energy needs with case study from Holland with Peter and Ryan Cotton, and then after they're done, we'll do some questions. And then there's part two is the Grand Haven energy, and Field Reichardt will be discussing that topic. So if we don't have any additional questions, or if my group doesn't want to add anything else, I'll just turn it over to Ryan and Peter.
Hey, thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate that. And Peter and I are going to tag team a little bit. He's going to join in to fill in some meat on the bones. And I'm going to, also stand corrected, because Peter lived and breathed everything that happened in Holland from the very get-go, and still today as it evolves. I just want to do a shout out to Roger Jonas. Roger, I haven't seen you for such a long time, so it's a pleasure, and it's good to meet up in this way. So I was city manager of Holland from 2012 to 2017. And I was fortunate to inherit a point in time where they just completed something called a community energy plan, and we were in the implementation mode. And I love implementation. So it was a beautiful opportunity to do something that I loved a great deal, especially associated with environmental change or stopping environmental change. So as you hear tonight, and I have some slides to show, and Peter will explain a few things. As you hear tonight, think about whether, in addition to our national efforts and our global efforts and our global concerns, whether we want to do some more action locally. I think that's how I got asked to speak, is because there is a planning meeting, and there's a thought, well, let's hear more about community energy planning and what we could do here. I also want to put the note in your heads that it's not all about working with or alongside the city government or the Board of Light and Power. It's also about working alongside residents to have a home that's more comfortable and more energy efficient and reduced cost for them to operate. And that might include tenants as well. So there's a workforce housing, kind of a social equity component to this as well. So I'm going to give you the bare bones. I'm going to go to my slides now. Think about whether you want to tackle this, and if so, it would be a joy to work together. As we talk about what's happening at the power plant later with Field, that's it might be something we want to strategize about as to who and how we would go forward. So I'm going to hit the share screen button. And I'm going to go to my PowerPoint.
Real quick, Ryan, I just want to state that if people would go up into their view button in the upper right corner, you can select speaker view, and then you'll have the entire view of that speaker. Sorry about that, Ryan. Go ahead.
No problem. Can people see a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so community energy plans, and it's a pathway towards, as I mentioned, more comfortable homes and improved environment. And Peter is with me shortly, and I want to give credit. Several of the slides came from, I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce it right, Elaine. Someone tell me if it's better. He presented about a year ago to this group. So he gave me his PowerPoint and I used a couple of his slides. So the next few years, I think we all agree, is a critical time for our energy future. What's going on in Texas right now, if you ever listen to the Daily, they unpacked it, the New York Times, and that podcast explains that it's related to climate change. Nationwide, a lot of communities have adopted strategies, the mayor's initiative for sustainability, community energy plans. There's all sorts of strategies nationwide. In Michigan, there was an energy plan associated with the former governor. I haven't caught up with the current governor as to what her thoughts are on that, but he was very instrumental. A woman named Valerie Brader worked with us directly out of his office. Holland, we're going to learn about, and the question is, what about Grand Haven? So, okay, I have oops, I'm going to go backwards. There's 3 technology levers that can make a huge difference, right? This is about energy efficiency. Of course, there's future technologies, maybe associated with hydrogen, and then there's removal of carbon. But there needs to be policy supporting it, some local, some national, some global. It's something that maybe people are aware of is electric power has a lot to do with the greenhouse emissions. A bunch of it's power plants, but then there's all the power we use for buildings. And you can see a large portion is space heating, water heating, whenever you're burning something, right? Or whenever you're burning or getting power from something that's burned, unless it's renewable. In our homes, it's related to greenhouse gases. So there's 70 million homes that account for 10% of US carbon emissions. And a lot of that has to do with electricity fuels in buildings. That's what I'm pointing out. So we can make an impact on carbon by what we burn in relation to our homes. And while we work nationally on a carbon dividend, locally, what we heat, cool, water, lighting, etc., our appliances can make a difference. So in Holland, a group like this, and I'm going to turn it over to Peter here, started a big idea, and it evolved into the community energy plan. So Peter, we're a small group of people. I imagine your group wasn't huge. Could you just kind of tell us what took place in 2008 or 9 or whatever those years were, and pick up from there?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Ryan. My job is to try and give you about 15 years of history in 5 minutes. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the high points that gives you some sense for how Holland evolved into producing a community energy plan. In retrospect, I think we're recognizing that some of the groundwork for that was being laid in around the year 2000 already. At the time, Governor Granholm had issued some sort of directive about what sort of power plants we would be using into the future. And she was ruling out coal-fired power plants. Holland at the time had a coal-fired power plant. And the Board of Public Works in Holland actually sued and won the right to hold and reserve their ability to build any kind of plant they wanted, including coal. So that whole process sort of created an awareness in the community that maybe this is something we should be talking and thinking about. It wasn't a conscious advocacy kind of thing, but it set a conversation in the public sphere that raised the issue. Not too long after that, I believe the Sierra Club actually sued the BPW, alleging that in the Holland area. So again, there was an action taking place, which being talked about in the community began to set for people the message specifically talking about energy future, but it kind of created the environment that allowed the conversation to arise, at some point later in time. What really sparked the real conversation in Holland came in 2006, when the Board of Public Works announced that the James DeYoung coal-fired power plant out on the lakefront was no longer viable. It wasn't justifiable to put any more investment into that old plant. It had to be replaced. And they announced that their intention was to replace it with an even bigger coal-fired power plant. And that then just began to raise a question for people in the community about what was the best thing we would want to do. You know, this is sort of concurrent also with that time when the environmental awareness, a number of people around the city who began to ask, do we really want another coal-fired power plant? Especially, do we want another $300 million coal-fired power plant? And them for windmills on every church steeple. That was kind of their shtick, that we needed to move on to alternative energy. And there were other small groups that kind of popped up and began pressing the conversation. In time, that kind of coalesced as an overall kind of community leadership seemed to emerge that was going to carry the conversation. I was a part of that, and we call ourselves the Community Energy Advisory Group. And we took on the task of lobbying City Council, lobbying BPW, and educating the community so that we would make a good energy plan for the community. We didn't believe a bigger coal-fired power plant was the answer. That conversation, as it was pressed forward, began to register with City Council and City for the city. And they tasked the Sustainability Committee with coming up with a framework for Holland's energy future. The Sustainability Committee, in turn, then contracted with a consulting firm, Garforth International, who came to town and spent about a year with us, mapping all the ways in which energy gets used, where it gets used, which neighborhoods use it more intensely than others, what kind of a future trajectory and pathway are we on. And they pulled together all the data that really mapped how energy gets used, who uses it, how much do they use. And we had a pretty good baseline for understanding what was going on in the community. Then the consultant then also created scenario energy footprint. What sort of actions could we take? What bundle of actions would lead in that direction? And they created about 4 different scenarios, depending on how intensely you wanted that, selected the most assertive option. And the goal was to take our carbon footprint, which the consultant had calculated at 24 metric tons, equal to 24 metric tons per person per year. Just visually, that person, we alone were putting in the atmosphere, regardless of the rest of the world. We knew from the study that if we did nothing at all, 36 metric tons. So 50% larger than the present moment, about 2010. The goal was to get it down to 10 tons by 2050. And then there were a number of actions that could be taken under that umbrella, which cumulatively would lead to reaching that target. One of the biggest involved was the power plant itself. And in the meantime, what was the best thing for them to do? And they sponsored a program called P21, which was Power for the 21st Century. And a lot of open houses, a lot of education events, a lot of sampling of the community on their behalf, and a lot of work with their own consultants trying to understand where is the industry headed, what should we do? When all was said and done, the BPW itself decided that coal was not their future. And they decided to go with what's called a combined cycle gas turbine plant, which is for natural gas, state of the art. It's kind of a double dip process where you burn the fuel and you get your initial burn, spin of the generators, and then you capture that hot water and heat, run it through a second cycle, you get another spin of the generators. And then in Holland, you still end up with a real lot of hot water, and we've used that to expand our snowmelt system. So So BPW on their own decided, that was probably the best for our future. That feathered in rather well with a community energy plan.
And Peter, can I pick up there?
Yes.
And please chime in as you look at these next slides. So a small group of people, just to summarize, got together in 2006 or 7, the West Group, and now about 2012 is when the P20, I believe, is when the decision was made. The community energy plan decision, by the way, wasn't called energy plan. It was called strategies, because it was viewed by some officials at that point in elected positions that a plan had a feeling of a socialist connotation. So they was called community energy strategies. And you're going to see that in a document I'm going to show you here in a minute. Later on, as all of us worked together and built trust, collaboration, and success, the strategy was dropped and everyone uniformly called it a community energy plan. So I just make that point to say that there's a building of trust that goes into this as well. So I'm going to share the screen again. And where was I? Oh, here we go. All right, so everyone takes a great deal of pride in that this was a big idea, and in Grand Haven. We just have to work some more at it. So how do I get to advance it? I'm not getting it advanced. Let me try something different. And show and try again. All right, can you see that? A new slide?
Good.
So these are some of the accomplishments, and didn't have enough time to really explain them, but the community energy plan was adopted, task forces were created, and there were 6 of them. Some of those related to what's known as home energy retrofits, which I'm going to ask Peter to explain towards the end here. And that created legislation that we got approved and signed by the governor, the upfront cash to spend $10,000 or $15,000 on retrofitting your home. A sustainability institute was formed in collaboration with Hope College. A Holland Energy Fund was created, funded by some of the dividend from the Holland Board of Public Works. Board of Light and Power pays a dividend to the city of Grand Haven. So that's certainly a comparable outcome. Snowmelt was expanded, the amount of walking was doubled, and also extended to the new, how many thousand size building? I think it's like a 40,000 square foot building. The Home Energy Retrofit Program was launched that uses on-bill financing to pay for hundreds of homes. How many hundreds of homes, Peter, have been retrofitted?
Sorry, I was muted. Probably about 200 today, as of today, I think.
So dozens and dozens. They didn't want to go through maybe this on-bill financing, but they just did it on themselves because of the education that was provided. The Holland Energy, I'm not sure which the P stands for these days, but there was continued use of the Holland Energy Fund, 501c3 status. They help make grants to underfund, what's the word for it, to help fund the on-bill financing. And then other activity. What's not shown here is that all of the LED streetlights, all of the streetlights became LED thanks to the Holland Board of Public Works, and it paid for themselves because of the energy savings. All kinds of energy optimization programs were happening, which is part of their normal bailiwick, and with Knock on Every Door campaign to advise people of ways to save energy and have a more comfortable home. So this is what the energy plan looks like, and I'm going to turn it over to you again in a minute, Peter, because I wanted to go into the energy plan, and I'm not finding that. Here we go. No, it's not it. Oh, here it is. So by opening this link, which apparently is not going to open for me. Here we go. It's a 150-page report. Peter, do you know how much it cost?
What do you mean by cost, Ryan?
Do you remember who funded it and how much was paid by the Sustainability Committee to get this report?
I think the funding came out of joint BPW city funding. My recollection is the overall consulting fees were in the neighborhood of 180,000.
He's an internationally recognized leader in this field. And we followed a model, everything that you saw there. If there was any funding needed, we followed a model of 50% payment by the city, 50% payment by the Holland Board of Public Works. So this is what the cover looks like, creating a global competitive community. And I just want to point out that there's some mantras, by the way. Here's, all the people that went into it, the project work team members, the Energy Task Force members, Sustainability Committee members, and a lot of these names you still recognize are active in the area. But what I'm getting at is, did I go by it, Peter?
Pardon me for a very brief interruption. If you were looking to try to show that document, I had maneuvered to it and I just posted the link in the chat box. If you were trying to find the PDF.
Good. Can you see this? There's 3 bullet points.
No, all we see is the cover sheet.
Oh, really? Okay, well, I'll just read them to you. There's 3 mantras. Everyone wanted to ensure economic competitiveness. So this was about fiscal resiliency as well. Everyone wanted to provide reliable and affordable energy. Well, obviously they're having trouble in Texas with that right now. So we wanted to make sure we were reliable, and we wanted to protect the environment. So Peter, maybe you want to pick up from there and tell us a little bit about how those mantras were created, or anything else that you want to emphasize that I glossed over.
Well, I think a lot of people will recognize that trio as sort of a variation on the triple bottom line theme. And the degree to which business is a major component of the community. The Board of Public Works likes to point out that 80% of the electricity goes to commercial institutional facilities. Only 20% goes to residences. That's a very unusual portfolio for a power company. So there's a lot of pride in that, and there's also recognizing that making changes introduces a certain amount of vulnerability. And so there was a wanting to recognize that as we transition, we need to do it in such a way as to maintain the vitality of the community. We also recognize that we're in competition with other areas for business. And so we knew we had to maintain the cost structure that made our power attractive. And then there was that environmental piece, recognizing nobody was saying climate change out loud, but that's what's in the background. We know that there are things occurring in this world that we have to address if we're going to have promote the well-being of the people who live in a city. And so that environmental piece is built into it, recognizing that you really have to be successful in all 3 arenas simultaneously if you're actually going to be successful. Failure in any one of them means you're going to fail. And so if we were trying to recognize there's this kind of balance, requires a lot of due diligence towards your goal.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to wrap up with some other things that are going on statewide that relate to this energy plan, and then see what questions you have for Peter and I. So I'm going to share again. And can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, you can't, huh? Okay, thank you. What should I do wrong? Can you see the screen?
No.
Oh, boy. Well, then I'm just going to speak and get this, and I'll have this shared with someone later. So what I want you to know about is this on-bill financing is being copied by other communities. Traverse City has adopted it. They have an on-bill financing program. The state of Michigan has put energy or information out there about it. We're one of 29 states that allow for that. And in Grand Haven, we could have a lot of that work happen here. Peter, how much, what was the largest grant that was given by the Holland Energy Fund to homeowners?
I think the largest grant we gave may have been 30,000 to an individual homeowner.
So with this kind of cooperation and success, as well as to their living conditions. And the last thing I want to point out is, although you can't see the screen, is
No.
we can. All right. So we're going to talk about this later, of course, as a team. But the questions are: do we or do we not do something like this? If we did, we'd need to seek budget support from the council and the BLP in April. Hopefully, a 50-50 split. Hopefully, we could do it for less than 180. I do RFPs all the time, so if we had funding, I could do the RFP to support. Hopefully it'd be done by, it took a year, maybe we can compress it to 6 months. Maybe it would take a year and a half, but get it in the capital improvement budget thereafter next April. And at a minimum, get this home energy retrofit benefit into Grand Haven residents' homes. And of course, do a lot for the environment as well. That's the information about the on-bill financing, Traverse City. If we don't do anything, we're, as everyone has seen from Elaine, the central grade heat's going to rise. Why should we do this? Partly for our kids. And it's a complex process, involves information, strategies, and organization. And we have all of those within our capability.
John, or maybe it's John, had a question about maybe the businesses that participated. I see that Peter did respond that the two specific ones he asked about, Padnos and Brooks, he's not sure if they were involved, but maybe you would want to speak to whether businesses or industries got involved with the Holland plan.
Yeah, you're stretching my memory because we're going back quite a few years here. I was not aware of those two particular parties being publicly or obviously involved. My suspicion is there were conversations behind the scenes, but I have no way of knowing that. I'm trying to remember, there's a council who helped fund some of the educational and publicity materials that we used at the time. There was a developer, Lakeshore, high profile cottages who participated with us that I remember. There were folks from Hope College. It's the same developer that did the piano factory here. His son, I'm blanking on his name. Yeah. Yeah, those were the sorts of folks who were engaged, some of whom actually kicked in funding to help us do when we had to print something or reach out or have resources to distribute in the community.
Okay.
Thank you. I think we also need to recognize Jan O'Connell. The Sierra Club was some of the teeth behind what people were gnashing their teeth over back in those days. And of course, your support, Jan, made a lot of things go faster, I think. Is there anything you want to add?
Just to say that I really enjoyed working on the home energy retrofit from the beginning till it got taken over with Peter taking over. I think it was a great move, and I'd like to see that expanded in cities across Michigan, if not the United States.
Yeah, if I could add, Ryan shared earlier on his timeline that once the community energy strategy was approved by the city council, then the question was, well, how do we pull this off? And that gave rise to working task forces that would have a lead person either from city staff or from BPW staff, along with a group of citizens to consider that particular piece of the puzzle. And Jan was on the Home Energy Retrofit task force, I think from day one, Jan. We met for 4 years, folks, before we actually got city council to approve an actual home retrofit program.
I think we could cut that in half here. And I've spoken to some people about it, and it's like bread and butter now. It's just an easy thing to sell.
The best part was going door to door, I thought.
Yeah.
I think that, well, we have one more question and then we're going to move on to our next presenter. But Jan was wondering about Peter, what form did your lobbying council take?
We did things in public in terms of, at one point in time, we created an insert in the Holland Sentinel, a 4-page insert that kind of laid out our thinking, some of the costs associated with one line of decision making or another. We asked to speak with council members. We asked to speak with people we thought were influential in the council or in the city, who would work with, would be able to speak to council and have them indicate that they thought it was a wise direction to go. Yeah, those are probably the main lines. We did backyard, like I said, my memory's kicking in here. We did a lot of backyard to come over, and then one of our people from the group would kind of make a presentation. Here's what's going on in the city. Here's what we think it means. Here's what we think you should be saying to your council persons. So as much as possible, we tried to get people.
And also word of mouth helped, because once we had some successes, like I didn't use the fund, but I just renovated my home to be energy efficient. It was dramatic. Went from $250 energy bills in the winter to $50 for the natural gas. That was more than the average. Peter, there's a national average, 50-some% is what you can reduce your energy use by. Is that right?
Very simple changes can get you 20% rather easily. It would take a pretty good job to get to 50% typically. The average job in Holland at the time, the cost to the contractor was about $15,000 per house as a working average. A lot of air sealing, a lot of insulation, in some cases windows, in some cases more efficient appliances, and various combinations thereof. I would say you need to pay attention in Grand Haven to what your community profile is. In Holland, residential, that's unusual for communities in the country because we have such a big industrial base. You're going to be able to make a larger argument to council based on your residential savings because your residential component of the overall package is such a higher percentage.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know what the percentage is. It'd be interesting if anybody does know, but maybe that's a good segue for us to turn it to our next speaker, Field Reichardt, who he's one of the people that started the Grand Haven Energy Group here in Grand Haven regarding what's Grand Haven Board of Light and Power plans for Harbor Island and beyond. So, over to you, Phil. Do you by any chance know the residential industry breakdown?
You mean, are you asking me that question?
Do you know?
I have no idea.
That'd be interesting to find out. Anyway, you're on.
Okay, well, firstly, thank you for the data, and it was really interesting. One of the questions I had, which I just posed a minute or two ago, and I don't think it got through to you, what was the total amount of subsidy that went to all the people that took advantage of those subsidies in Holland?
Field, my recollection is in the first full year of home energy retrofits, our incentive to homeowners totaled about $250,000. And we leveraged, that was 20% of job cost. So we leveraged dollars about 4 to 1. Homeowners supplied the rest of the cost of the project.
So the total was $250,000?
That was the cost that the city committed to as the incentive to homeowners
Okay.
in order to do a home energy retrofit project.
And how many took advantage in individual homes?
I'm remembering that first year best because I retired, a couple years into this. I think we had about 100 in that first year, approximately.
And how many years does this go on?
It is in its fourth year now.
Okay. And do you have any idea how much totally has been spent at this point?
I don't have that answer for you. I can tell you that the board who managed the program, the Holland Energy Fund, made a change after year one and took the incentive to homeowners down from.
Yeah. Were any businesses given that incentive?
Not through a home energy retrofit program. There was a task force in the city which was studying how do we work with commercial institutional players. And for
Peter,
a number of reasons.
Yeah, Peter, Board of Public Works did hire that gentleman, I forget his name, who went to every business at some point and explained what they could do in terms of rebates if they added some efficiencies. I think that's where they ended up.
Barry Rutherford.
Correct.
The energy doctor?
No, Barry Rutherford works for the Board of Public Works. And they do have an incentive program through the BPW that uses those they utilize the state mandated energy optimization funds to find incentive programs for commercial institutional facilities.
Okay, thanks.
Energy service company approach to have performance contracting, whereby we put $3.4 million into all of the city buildings being energy retrofitted. And then we paid that back over, we had 11-year payback, I think, looking at the same thing. And the city was one of the first to bite off a bunch of their buildings.
Thank you. Am I on? I don't know. Apparently not.
Yeah, you're on.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I have no idea. I can't tell if I'm on or not. Thanks very much. I'm basically are from Grand Haven. I hope that a number of you are, or from the parts of Grand Haven Township, the parts of Ferrysburg, and the parts of Spring Lake Township that are in the service area of the Grand Haven Board of Light and Power. We are facing a very interesting time in our community. Unlike Holland, where your board is appointed by the city government, it's the citizens of the city, not the district that the BLP serves, but by the city. And that board is some very fine people, in my opinion. They tend to be a little older. I think the average age is 83 or 84, which is pretty amazing. And they're people that are good citizens, well-considered people, but they're not views of the way things should be done. They also seem to have some support from certain members of our city council. We have a 5-member board and a 5-member city council, which is kind of interesting. Give you a little bit of an overview. What's going on is the Grand Haven Board of Light and Power is working on a plan to replace the Sims power plant, which you all are familiar with, that was on Harbor Island, with a complex of consisting of three sort of constructions. One is a substation, electrical substation, which has already pretty much been built. The second is they want to build a $17 million, 12.5 megawatt peaker power plant. A peaker plant is a plant that's turned on when the prices on the grid for energy are very high. It helps to mitigate the price, and that's the primary focus of a peaker plant. The third building they want to build is about an $8 to $9 million new, beautiful office building with great views of the river and a nice rooftop garden and a big terrace and quite a lovely facility, which is interesting because they just spent some money remodeling, over $1 million remodeling their current offices. But anyway, that's what's going on. They also are tearing down the Sims plant. You're all aware of that. They have a massive, massive cleanup problem. None of us really know how bad it is, but we think that probably is going to be known fairly soon, how bad their issues are. The total cost that they have estimated for all of their projects, which was from last spring, is about $48 million, which they want to sell bonds to do this combination of projects. We're a lot smaller town than Holland. They want to spend $48 million or they want to sell bonds for $48 million, and then there will be the interest on those bonds for approximately 30 years. That's our understanding, is 30 years. So it'd be probably close to $100 million totally. Interestingly, the Grand Haven Board of Light and Power paid off the bonds on the Sims power plant in July of 2016. They turned off the Sims plant a year ago, almost today. It might have been the 20th of February, but it's a year ago. Since they paid off the bonds, and since they have been buying completely off the grid and primarily serving as a distribution company, they have piled up approximately $26 million of cash. And they ranged the amount of money, depends on how much power is being used, but it's anywhere from $600,000 to $1 million a month of profit that they're making. And yes, some of that money goes to the city of Grand Haven, which is great. We're not opposed per se to what they're planning to do. We have three main points. The first point is that we think that whatever they do has to be economically and fiscally the right thing for our community. The idea of bonds and something that might be turned off in 5 or 6 years because of changes in technology and renewable energy doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us. Second issue, because the BLP is a publicly owned asset, we believe it should have really, really high environmental responsibility. It's located on a very, very vulnerable. For the BLP, a company called Golder has told the BLP that their site, of the 160 sites that Golder is working on around the United States, the site on Harbor Island is the most complex site that they're working on. So there's serious environmental issues with Harbor Island. The third point that we raise is that with the dramatic changes that are taking place in renewable energy and in energy storage systems, we think that it makes some sense to wait 5-6 years, buy off the grid, where you're making a ton of money doing that, have a very, very serious second look at what's going on. And it may be that within 5 years, energy systems, storage systems, and renewable energy will be sufficient to take care of our community. We are, I think we're viewed as some kind of communists or something by certain people in the community because we're raising very, very, very practical questions. Interestingly, we're getting a significant response from the business community, the industrial community in our town. The number 1 and the number 3, and we believe the number 2 and number 8 and number 9 of our largest energy users have agreed at this point to jointly communicate with the city council and with the Board of Light and Power that they want them to just stop, restudy this thing, and incidentally not have the BLP pick the consultants that do the study, because most of the studies that they've done to date, we feel have had some influence from the leadership of the BLP to come in a certain direction. We have no proof of that, but we are concerned that that may have happened. I was very intrigued with we talked a little bit about this last night in a meeting that our group had, and Ryan participated. We talked about sustainability study. We haven't had a sustainability study. We haven't had a community energy plan. We haven't had, any of the sorts of, you would think, necessary stepping stones that need to take place before a decision is made, which would be, in our community, the largest public investment in decades and decades, possibly back to the 1970s when the Sims plant was built. I can't think of a bigger investment that we've done, and yet it's just been done by the leadership of the BLP, and they don't want to listen, and we're very concerned about it. So we're making quite a bit of noise. We are getting support from industry. We are getting support from more and more people in the community. Right now, I think we have about 375 people that have indicated an interest in supporting us, which I think is a very good thing. But rather than go into a whole bunch of detail, I'll just give you two interesting statistics before we go forward. The first statistic, and this is from the October 31st, 2020 issue of The Economist magazine. Between 2014 and 2019, power produced by solar energy dropped in price by 82% in the United States. In the same 5-year period, same article in The Economist, the cost of battery storage systems dropped 87%. Those, I think, are fascinating statistics. And I would just add one other thing. We're going to have a very, very large solar field very close to us in Grand Haven sometime within the next couple of years. Consumers Power is doing a 250 megawatt solar project on the waste water treatment facility in Muskegon County. It's literally square miles of solar system that's going to be right in our backyard. Anyway, I would rather answer questions than babble on here.
While people are formulating questions, Field, is there a way that people can get involved if they want?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Patty. Incidentally, Patty is somebody that probably should be nominated for sainthood. She's been working like crazy on this stuff, and we very much appreciate it. We have a very diverse group, I might add. We have a former Republican state representative. We have the current chairman of the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners, who's a Republican, former mayor of Grand Haven. We have another former mayor of Grand Haven, a very conservative woman, Gail Ringelberg. We have a very diverse group, young people, old people. A couple of our members are listening this evening, which I appreciate very much. Everybody's working pretty hard, and that's good. The way you can get involved, if you have a pen right there, write down ghenergy.org. ghenergy.org. That is our website. And on our website, right on the splash page, is a little form on the bottom where you can send a message to the BLP, although that's an interesting issue right now. And also, there's on our About Us page is a little place where you can actually sign up, and we have a couple of tasks. We're looking for people to be communicating neighbor to neighbor. We may be doing a petition drive. We don't know at this point, but the city council in Grand Haven is going to make a decision on whether or not they're going to do bonding, probably in May of this year, maybe a little earlier. So we have a rubber hitting the road situation right now where we're really trying to have an impact. But ghenergy.org.
There is a question. If I don't get it right, Jeff, let me know. But is it known if there are regional differences as to the cost of solar energy delivery to residential consumers?
I know that there is a more robust use of solar energy in the Southwest and in the South. But there was a report very recently. I don't know, Andrea, if you have that at your hands. I don't have it with me, but there was a report recently about energy in 3 different parts of the country. It's actually a YouTube video. It is really great, and the man talks about super energy, super electricity, or something. And he looks at 3 sections of the country. He looks at the South, he looks at the West, and he looks at New England. And New England is an area very similar to ours, and the program it's working even in New England. There's a 50 megawatt solar facility that's just got all the permits to be built at Marquette. There is the little town of Lance in the Upper Peninsula has a community energy system. They buy most of their energy from Upper Peninsula Power, but they have put in a solar field, and they sold individuals in the community panels. And the panel, the person gets the tax break from buying the panel, owning the panel, and the energy that's produced by that panel is netted off on their meter. So they actually, they get they sold their entire, the initial project, which was organized by Northern Michigan, Michigan Tech. They didn't think they were going to be able to sell their whole thing. They had it all sold before they even built it. And now they're building a second system because everybody in town loves this thing. I don't know the differentiation, but there are now two things about solar panels. They now can pick up energy from the sun, but they also can be downward looking. And when there's snow on the ground, it picks up energy from the snow. So they're way more practical than they used to be. It's one of the reasons that prices have come down so much.
Good. And Jan asked, what is the downside or the risks to continue buying all of Grand Haven energy from the grid?
Well, sounds like an alert going off there, Patty. I don't know what the downside is. The only downside would be if energy prices went up dramatically in coming years from sources of energy, and that's one of the things that we're hoping that we can. I know that Jan's helping us look for this to find out what the projections on energy costs are. With the number of huge solar farms that are being constructed in Michigan, the key to me is what's going to be happening with energy storage systems, battery storage systems. And I don't think they're there yet. And I think the downside in the short range is just if there's a dramatic change in energy costs, because right now energy is extremely cheap.
Yeah, I can't think of a lot of downsides either. There's people in the community, in Grand Haven community, believe that if the grid goes down, we'll still have power.
Well, that's a very interesting question, because there's I am not an expert on the technology, but my understanding is that the peaker plant is designed to be turned on when prices on the grid are high to help mitigate the prices. The plant is designed to be used 5 to 10% of the time. The general manager of the Board of Light and Power has used 2 figures to talk about the total amount of energy that plant would produce. He used the figure 4% of the total energy for Grand Haven in one message. And then he used, in the Rotary Club in Grand Haven about 10 days ago, he used the figure 5%. So this plant is not going to be producing a lot of the energy in the community, and yet the bond payers are going to have to be paying for the thing.
Right, and it's not like it can just be turned on. If the grid goes down, it can't just be fired up too.
It would be turned on. Well, if the grid turns down, Patty, but my understanding is that it is designed to cut prices on the grid. It would also be used potentially to heat the snowmelt system in Grand Haven, which for $17 million, I think we could do it less expensively than that, but that's an issue. The general manager of the BLP has told people in the community that it will be no problem taking care of the emergency needs of the community. Well, the plant is designed to produce approximately 1/3 of the energy requirements that the city has. So needs of the city, unless they run direct distribution channel to the people that have energy needs in the city. If it runs down a street, everybody's going to be drawing off it. And I don't know how it would work unless they can just go knock at everybody's door and tell them to turn their power off.
It looks like David would like to comment on this. I think you're not muted.
Right, I was waiting I didn't know if you were allowing other conversation in. Is anyone else from guy? And I chatted that guy up for a long time, and I don't know where I got all my information. But a peaking plant does, it runs when your costs are at their maximum.
Right.
It saves you money. And I was just looking up if you're there, and even I've listened to one of the online things of the Board of Power and their load management. I know if we're going to do solar, you have to put a bigger maximum ability to create power because solar is not available all the time. And they know that they talk about their backup. They want separation of shafts, of directions of where your potential power comes from. You don't want, if you have a huge backup reserve of one type of power and it all goes down together, that's a problem. So I'm not confident that I know that there's a problem. I understand some of your issues with the and it's going to be a reciprocating gas turbine or gas generator, not a turbine type.
Right.
It's like what I had I was in the Navy. That's what we had for backup, was one on each end of the ship. And I understand the financing. If it does go 30 years, that's beyond the confidence we can have in gas prices. Natural gas prices, I was trying to look it up as before you called on me, but natural gas prices in Texas soared in the last few days. And I wish I had actual numbers I could tell you, because it went from being like $3 per million BTU to like something 100 or 1,000. I don't have it. Couldn't quickly come up with the right number, but it was a huge multiple because of the problems they're having there.
Yeah, I read.
I can't say for sure yet because I haven't followed. I've only been at 2 meetings or listened in on 2 presentations, but there is something to be said about having a backup of a different type. And I do know that solar is advancing all the time. I don't know if it's on it. It has a price curve that was, that dropped dramatically. I don't know if it's about to level off or it's going to continue to go down. So I don't know what the answer is, but there's a lot to be learned. Is anybody else listening in to what the BPW is saying? Are those the right initials for Grand Haven?
BLP.
BLP. Okay. Yeah. I know they're different at each different power plant. Is anyone else listening to what they're teaching us? Because the man I did call said they got their decision making a little far ahead of, but is anybody else learning what they're trying to put out to the community?
I want to just interject while people are formulating the answer. The way Holland did it was something called a sustainable return on investment report that was funded 100% by their answer all those questions you just raised and projected it out so many years and monetized all these variables, from social variables to environmental variables to fiscal variables, and then made their decision. So I don't know if that kind of thing has been done here. I suspect it has not been to that extent.
I don't believe it has been done, Ryan. And David, I don't have the answers to your technical questions, and I don't know that anybody on here does. What we've asked is that we pause this project because they are making a ton of money right now, pause the projects that are not selected by the BLP to take a look at what these options are. And the sustainability plan, which Ryan Cotton just mentioned, makes a huge amount of sense. I'm quite sure we have not done that. One other thing I point out about solar energy is that if you have solar energy, you're really not paying for the fuel. You're paying for the maintenance, and you're paying for the infrastructure that exists and that you're adding to. And it is when you have a gas system, you're constantly buying your fossil fuels to fund this. To supply your. That's a much more controversial issue. I understand from a consultant who works in Grand Haven as a consultant for both DTE and Consumers Power, that wind energy actually produces more energy more inexpensively, but that the maintenance costs on them and they do wear out. That tends to have a significant financial effect. Whereas once you have a solar system, it runs a lot longer. I think somebody just put a little message up. I didn't see it. Might have been Jan. Did you?
Yeah, I had a message for David.
David?
I don't know if you can read it. I noticed
I did, and I take your point. And so I can definitely support the whole pause. I don't know if 5 years is right, but a pause. And I'll make the point, I'm not in the Grand Haven service area. I got roped into it. I have some background. And I wanted to, and somebody else said something about the diesel generators on natural gas. So it's a dual fuel, which is the kind of backup generator I got for myself, dual fuel. Anyway, okay, I'm done now.
David, I also put in the capacity numbers. For solar, it's come up. It's 50 to 55% compared to full capacity.
The process, there's a lot to learn, and I start with a decent background in it, and I might stick with it, and I might go away. I don't know. I know that I don't have a vote. If I'm being helpful and it's entertaining to me, I'll stick around. Otherwise, we'll see what happens.
Well, we need entertainment, David.
Well, one thing I want to mention is when it comes to the energy planning, which a lot of your questions relate to also, doesn't live in the city limits. So I think you can still build trust and support and garner support without having to be within the city limits.
A rather interesting, hardworking, smart, amazing woman, Andrea Hendrick, has just put a few minutes ago the link to the YouTube report, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. And I strongly recommend anybody that's concerned about whether or not solar makes sense for our area to take a look at that. It's a really, really eye-opening report. Talks about all over the country and the future.
Field, Deanne asked, what would you say to those who are concerned about the downtown sidewalk heating system? Who funds it and how is the heat supplied?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And we are advocating that an independent committee, ad hoc committee appointed either by the city government or by the Downtown Development Authority or somebody, take a look at it. The BLP says, hey, one of the main reasons you need to build this $17 million plant is so that we can heat the boilers for your snowmelt system. Well, I think we could do it for less expensively than $17 million. And I am a former downtown Grand Haven retailer. Some of you may remember the family business Reichardt, which was there for 81 years. And when they announced that they were going to build this snowmelt system, I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever heard of. The cost, it's obviously been a wonderful thing in Holland. I have converted my thinking. I think what you have in Grand Haven right now is a pretty cool thing. It's a great place for people to walk outside in the wintertime, and it is I think I'm not sure that it's the payoff that the retailers expect, and they're struggling right now. But that system is an asset to our community. But we also have the reality that the Spring Lake Township, there are people from Grand Haven Township, and they're basically subsidizing the downtown Grand Haven retailers. And if I were them, I'd be a little disturbed about that. But I think I love it, and I do think there needs to be a solution to it. And I don't think the numbers that have been thrown out by the BLP as to what the costs are going to be to operate are realistic. I think it could be done inexpensively, and that committee should be looking at that. And I think Gail Ringelberg, our former mayor, is trying to work with a group of people to do a little bit more.
Well, thoughts. Well, number one, they are using this boiler system right now. They did last winter and this winter because Sims has been shut down.
Right.
And that's working fairly well, as far as I can tell. I haven't. Of course, I'm not in Grand Haven right now, as you might have guessed. But so I know that's been working on that. The other point I want to make too is I live in the city of Ferrisburgh, and if these bonds come out, I will not have to pay anything on the principal interest because they're owned by the city of Grand Haven, the power BLP is, and I'm not in the city of Grand Haven. So therefore, I get a free ride. Therefore, I love the snow melt system because I don't have to pay for your bonds. So
actually, Roger, in this case, you will be paying for the bonds because these are revenue bonds. These are not faith and credit of the city of Grand Haven. And so you will be paying for the snow melt system. If the Board of Light and Power runs it.
Right. Let me go back one step too. I made the comment the other day that not this group, but another group, that I always got the feeling that the BLP is kind of backed into this solution, and they started with the premise is we have to come up with some way to keep the snow melt system going. So therefore, what options do we have to do that? And therefore, they've come up with this option. And I'm not sure they've done their work on it, but I would like to see a return on investment on this type of thing, payback. What's it really worth? And I'm not sure I'm buying this idea that they need it for backup for peak periods or to put more back into the grid for cheaper rates. I understand that.
Well, we don't know what the rates are going to be, but I agree with you that that's an issue that should be looked at by somebody outside of the BLP. You raise an interesting point, which we didn't talk about. How do we get to a 12.5 megawatt plant? In 2018, the city council in Grand Haven passed with a 3-2, whether all 5 voted for it, but 3 people were the majority and wanted it to happen. 2, including the current mayor and former councilman Brugger, I think had some quite serious questions. But the old mayor and a couple other members of the council voted to allow the Board of Light and Power to tear down the Sims plant if they would and I don't remember the year, I think it was 2022, might have been 2023, if by that point, the Board of Light and Power would be generating somewhere within their operational area 36 megawatts of energy. That was the old plant was producing 72. We really only need 36. So they were given the authorization to go ahead and tear down Sims, clean it up, but with the proviso that they also come up with a plan to develop a plant to do 36 megawatts of power. This is a little technical. They looked at it, it was over $100 million. They backed away from that. They went down to 20 megawatts. And I think that came in at 55 or 60 million. I can't remember the exact figure, but something like that. And then they took a look at the gas supply to the city of Grand Haven. The gas supply that's available is for a 12.5 megawatt plant. So the decision was to do the 12.5 megawatt plant based on the energy supply. They didn't want to run a new gas line through town and south to some connection point. So it's not an economic decision. It's almost a political decision. And then they've gotten, they're strongly advocating that we do the do the snowmelt system, and we'll take care of your snowmelt system. And incidentally, we're going to heat our own driveway and our own parking lot with snowmelt. So that's all part of this whole thing as well. It's kind of crazy stuff. And I just really am concerned that with what is happening with renewable energy, what's happening with energy storage systems, and I'm the first to admit the energy storage systems are not here yet. But I believe within 8 to 10 years, it is going to be, you'll have something on the island, lovely facility on the island that just isn't going to be needed because it's going to be cheaper to be buying off the grid, and there's going to be more consistency. A friend of mine, some of you may know his name, Paul Hilligans, who used to be Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives, went to work as a senior executive for Detroit Energy. I talked to him about this whole thing last spring, and he said, "Field, you'd be crazy to do this. Buy off the grid. You might have some moments in the summer where you're paying more, but compared to the interest costs and the cost of maintaining staff to operate this thing and maintain the building, et cetera, you're going to be saving money in the long run." And I just think we need to stop, have a second set of eyes, and really look at this thing independently from the way the consultants that have worked with the VLP have worked.
I think that's especially true with the administration we have now. They seem much more committed to putting money and energy towards solving the energy or the climate change crisis. We have 2 questions out right now. One of them I think is for Field, and that's what's the next decision point when money will be committed? And the other one is for Ryan and Peter about if you felt there were any maybe mistakes that you made along the way with the Holland process. So Ryan, Peter, you can think about that question while Field.
Well, we're not 100% sure, but we are led to believe that the borderline power is getting its final costs. They probably will have those in I don't think it'll be this month, maybe in March. And I think they're going to go to the city council for approval to issue bonds. Incidentally, they have preliminary approval to issue up to $75 million bonds. I think are going to go to the city council probably in May to get approval. And right now we have an uphill fight to get the city council to say no. There's a small town pride of having a power plant, even though it isn't turned on. So we're working hard. We have a large group of people helping. A number of them are listening this evening, which I'm happy to see them. I'm up north. I've been skiing today. I'm going to be skiing tomorrow, but it's good to see you all. And but I'd be happy to answer any other questions. I'm going to put my email address, actually the email address for our organization, on the chat for anybody that has any additional questions or comments. I'm also willing to continue talking, but why don't you ask the question for Ryan and Peter? And it's good to see both of them.
So Peter and Ryan, while you guys were in Holland, any mistakes you felt you made along the way?
I'll just start the Holland Sustainability Institute with Hope College partnership. It never was an equal partnership. So without going through all the details, we had it grant funded. So I don't know, that's evolved. It's not exactly what we anticipated. And I'm not sure that has generated all the impact that we wanted. And Peter, you're closer to it than I, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, you're muted.
I'm telling people that when this is all over, I'm going to sell t-shirts and the slogan's going to be unmute yourself.
Yeah.
But I don't know if mistakes are the right word, but recognitions or learnings along the way. One of the things I think we didn't recognize at the time was the degree to which culture matters. And the BPW has been in place for 130 years with a central control command approach. And that's a real embedded culture. And the future is demanding a more diffuse participative approach to energy management. And that's a tough transition for an old dog. I think city council still has a small town mentality. And the reality is we are a regional hub. And the degree to which, so I'm trying to say, the degree to which you get some innovative thinking is tethered to some of these old cultures in place as we try to envision a more robust future. That relates, I think, in part to, what we were hoping would be this Hope College Sustainability Institute, that there would be this body within the community that articulated what's going on, what should we do, well, how do we think about a plan working forward? And that just never got the juice it needed because it never got the funding it needed. There wasn't the perception that we needed something like that. So that's more of a learning and I think a recognition. Culture matters. And in a certain sense, you need to be conscious of the culture you're working with and how can I change that culture. I think the other, if we want to call it a mistake we made, those of us who are grassroots advocates were so relieved when the community energy plan was passed that we all breathed a huge sigh of relief and we went home. 10 years later, we're getting back intended to do, and it's not accounting for the most current science, which says we have to make dramatic changes in reducing our use of greenhouse gases within 10 years. So we should have stayed in place and continued to press the urgency of dealing with this. Once it got absorbed into the normal working structures and committees and departments at City Hall, it just kind of settled down to be another program, another line item in the budget. We lost the vision for where our community could go.
I think Holland is at, what's it, 19 metric tons per person now, or is it 16?
We dropped from that 24 to 19, and that is principally because of the new power plant. The combined cycle gas turbine plant is twice as efficient as the old coal-fired power plant.
And we need to go to 10 in 10 years rather than 10 in
40 years.
40 years.
Well, 2050, it would have been 40 at the time.
Thank you.
So if there's going to be urgency, if there's going to be vision, there has to be a constant community voice, which is not rooted in the city structure or in the BPW structure. It's got to be a legitimate community voice.
I noticed that Andrea said Peter, and I agree with that. And when you were talking about the embedded culture, I mean, Holland is just a microcosm of the whole country and the whole world, right? And a lot of people are having great difficulty transitioning to what we have to do.
Right.
So, did anybody else have any questions or comments? David, go ahead. I don't think you're muted.
No, I'm muting myself because I feel like I'm yapping too much. Based on the natural gas line that runs to it, that's based on a diameter and a pressure. Taking different parts together. In Texas, in the last few days, they went from $5 per million BTU to $80 million BTU, back down to 40. That's what the utility pays. Those prices are being pushed around, and the fact that they're not responding quickly is causing the drop in the pressure of some of the lines from what they normally run, because they're not willing to pay the price. They're hoping that what's in the line already will cover it. And so if we are maxed out on that, that's an argument to bring down the rating of that generator. Because if it is an emergency generator for Grand Haven, when there's an emergency, the pressure there's a decent likelihood the pressure will drop off if the cost of that. And there's only really a 15-year window on the current prices for natural gas anyway. there's going to be a dramatic change over in now and so if it's financed for 30 years, there's a lot of reasons to argue that back down to a smaller generator.
Interestingly, the just a couple of weeks ago in January, I think the 14th of January, the Energy Information Agency, which is I think part of EPA, announced the gas prices projection for 2021 is almost going to double. And that was before this storm.
Sorry, say that again?
The Energy Information Agency, which is, I believe, actually the figure, they're going to be 80% higher. They're estimating they're going to be 80% higher just in 2021.
And I know they have been artificially held down because all the people who drill and produce it now are aiming for all that wet gas instead of the dry gas. And the dry gas is just over. They just produce too much of it because they make their money on the other stuff.
Well, whatever. I'm not a gas expert, but
I'm not either. But
I noticed that Andrea said there's a sustainability manager position in the city of Holland. Peter, are you interested in that?
I unmuted myself.
Yeah. Wasn't that Kent Freeland?
I can tell you, you're talking to a guy who has retired 3 times, and I think I've learned my lesson. My understanding is they took the old Home Energy Retrofit Program, which was a half-time job. They took the solid waste and recycling staff position, which was the part-time job, and rolled them into one job. So that person is going to be responsible for a lot of the so-called sustainability initiatives within the city of Holland. There'll be an element of that. The city has also contracted with the Outdoor Discovery Center to design community education.
Interesting thing that I just remembered. Our planning commission does a 5-year update, and it's interesting. In 2016, the Grand Haven Township and Grand Haven City planning commissions, in their master plans at that time, put in resiliency plans. I don't think that our city government has been paying much attention to that at all, and I don't think our BLP has paid any attention to it at all. I think what you got, Peter, it's really something you should be very, very proud of. You and Traverse City, I think, are amazing, and I think to a degree, South Haven.
I appreciate the comment, Field. Thank you.
Yeah.
My frustration is we're nowhere near where I want to be.
Yeah.
All right, Tom O'Brien here, just to keep things on time as best we can. I know we've run over. We'd like to wrap it up if anybody's got any end things to say here.
ghenergy.org.
I have one final comment, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that is, what we're up against here too is a much larger question, and that is Harbor Island itself. And where it goes. As my understanding, Sims is only a 25-acre parcel of that, and the rest of course, the Harbor Island itself was a dump, and most of it was underwater. Issues with the rest of it. So you clean up 25 acres, and you've got 150 acres left, and that's part of the Harbor Island complex. And people conflate the two. They put it all together, and they can't break out the parts like we are doing this part. And we're not saying we're solving a Harbor Island issue; it's solving the Sims issue. I think that's where we're from that's the other argument. It's not part of the whole plan.
Well, our third point is that since they are our second point, since they are a publicly owned utility, they need to be absolutely responsible for their own area. The rest of the Harbor Island area is, we don't know what the condition is. We don't know. And I personally think we should know. I think the citizens of the town should know what the problems are. Even the people in Ferrisburg should be concerned, Roger.
It's because that's where all the old refrigerators went, Phil.
Well, I'd like to say on behalf of Wetland Watch that there are significant wetlands and bird habitat on Harbor Island. So what used to be the dump is now a beautiful wetland with muskrats and cattails.
But the boat launch is also a wetland. Last year.
Mhm.
I hope the remediation includes the waterways, the South Channel and the surrounding area around the coal plant and its wind-blown coal that has made it into the water and sits on the bottom. It's I used to work for the Corps of Engineers, and we never was so contaminated. But we can move on from there. Thank you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think we can wrap up now. We're getting after 8:30 here, 8:40. I really appreciate, I got educated here. Thanks, Field, for your presentation and all your comments, everybody. All these chat comments, I've got a lot of new information there, and I appreciate everybody chiming in and chipping in and taking the couple hours to talk with us and get information out to everybody.
Tom, thank you for doing this. I would point out that the Grand River leads out into Lake Michigan, and it's our finest beaches are right there. And we need to be sure that we don't have a disaster waiting to happen. It's got to be dealt with, and the citizens need to know. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you especially to Peter. Peter, you helped kick us off as the CCL in Grand Haven, and you're still with us. So your steadfastness is a great joy. Thank you.